single dad
This is the
trusted
last
a maid
call.
with his
If
twins,
no one shows, I quit.
but she hid a millionaire secret. A single father, drowning in chaos. Twin boys, too wild for
Maybe
any
I just need
babysitter.
the right kind of chaos.
Until one night, a knock on the door changed everything. She wasn't like the others. She laughed
I
at the
told you I
spilled
needed
milk,
a little
played
mess.
superheroes on the floor, and turned the noise into laughter. For the first time, his
Maybe
house
she
felt
is
alive
different.
again. But secrets leave traces in email, a pair of
Je ne sais
shoes,
pas.
a language spoken too perfectly.
Who are you,
He
really?
asked, "Who are you really?"
My father
And her
is
answer
Richard
shattered him.
Carter.
My father.
You
is
turned us
Richard
into a
Carter.
test.
The woman he trusted was the daughter of a millionaire. And maybe, just maybe, his boy's only chance at love. Was this family real, or just another test? The truth had only begun to unfold. The wooden house at the edge of town was anything but quiet. Plates clattered on the counter. The microwave hummed with a tired buzz, and two high-pitched voices rose and collided like sparrows fighting for the same branch. Flour dust hovered in the air, clinging to the beams of weak afternoon light that leaked through the small kitchen window. A river of milk ran slowly across the tiled floor, pooling near the legs of an overturned toy truck. The whole room smelled of breadcrumbs, peanut butter, and childhood chaos. In the middle of it all stood Daniel Hayes, 34 years old carpenter, by trade, single father, by necessity. His broad shoulders bent under an invisible weight, his flannel shirt streaked with flour and sawdust from the shop. He held a ceramic bowl with one hand, steadying it from tipping, while his other hand clutched the phone so tightly the knuckles whitened. His voice was low, roughened by exhaustion and sleepless nights. "This is the last call I'm making," he muttered, each word pressing against his throat like a stone. "If no one shows up, I'll have to bring them with me to the shop, or quit again." It was not the first time he had spoken those words. In 2 months, 3 babysitters had come and gone, each one defeated not by neglect or cruelty, but by the relentless energy of 2 4-year-old boys who never agreed to sit still. Theo and Ben were his joy, his pride, his reason to keep breathing. And yet every day with them felt like wrestling a storm barehanded. He ended the call without waiting for reassurance. He already knew the silence on the other end meant another polite rejection. His thumb trembled as he set the phone down. He turned just in time to see Ben cheeks smeared with peanut butter, chasing Theo with a dripping spoon like it was a sword. "Enough," Daniel barked, but even his firmness sounded tired. "Just one dinner without a food fight, please." The boys froze for half a second, then burst into giggles darting across the kitchen like sparks escaping a fire. And then the doorbell rang. Daniel froze the spoon of peanut butter suspended in the air, the laughter of his sons echoing down the hall. His first thought was that it must be another tired neighbor complaining about the noise, or perhaps a sitter already regretting saying yes. He did not expect much. By now, expectation itself felt dangerous, like leaning too far over a broken railing. He wiped his hands on a towel, took a long breath that burned his lungs, and walked to the door. When he opened it, the cold air rushed in, carrying with it the faint smell of snow and city streets. On the porch stood a figure unlike any he had imagined. She was young, mid-20s. At most, her golden hair pulled back neatly beneath a knitted hat. Her coat was simple, cream-colored, with snowflakes melting along the hem. A canvas tote hung from her shoulder, worn but clean, the kind of bag that spoke of books and quiet afternoons. Her boots bore traces of slush proof she had walked here, not driven. Her face was calm, composed, almost serene, as if the chaos waiting inside could not touch her. She tilted her head slightly, her breath visible in the cold. "You're Mr. Hayes?" she asked, her voice soft, touched by winter air. Daniel blinked, caught between disbelief and skepticism. His hand still held the doorknob tightly, as though he expected the image to vanish. "You're the sitter?" he asked, suspicion sharp in his tone. The woman smiled, not nervously, not apologetically, but with a quiet assurance that unsettled him. "Sophia," she said simply. "Nice to meet you." Behind him, hurried footsteps thundered on the wooden floor. Theo peeked out from behind his father, his eyes wide with curiosity. "Are you here to play superheroes with us?" the boy asked eagerly. Sophia crouched down to meet his gaze, her eyes sparkling in the dim light from the porch. "Only if I get to be the Red Spider-Man," she answered. A sudden crash of milk followed. Ben had stumbled his cup, tipping splashing white across the floorboards and Sophia's boots. Daniel flinched, ready for the storm that always followed scolding frustration. Yet another sitter leaving in disgust. But Sophia only looked down, calm as ever, and with a light laugh said, "Well, I did say I needed a little mess." The boys burst into laughter, and just like that, the room softened. Daniel, still standing at the doorway, felt something stir deep in his chest. For the first time in months, the chaos did not feel like defeat. It felt like the beginning of something he could not yet name. Chapter 1. The babysitter who laughed at chaos. The kitchen looked like a childhood painting. Gone wildflower dusted the counter like a thin layer of fog milk streamed into a cloudy river, curling around a chair leg. Spoons and forks clattered like an orchestra badly out of tune. On the wooden cabinet door, a flowery handprint left the shape of a crooked leaf. On the tiled floor, a small red toy truck lay tipped on its side wheels, spinning lazily, catching the glow of the warm tungsten light. Laughter collided with arguments, two 4-year-olds sparring with the intensity of popcorn bursting in a hot pan. Daniel stood in the middle of it all, one hand steadying a chipped ceramic bowl, the other wiping sweat before gripping his phone tightly. Last call, he had said, but there was no one left on the other end to promise anything. He ended the call, sighed, and felt his chest as heavy as if the entire kitchen had been stacked on top of it. Ben, his cheeks smeared with peanut butter, raised a spoon like a sword, chasing Theo around the table. "Superheroes don't fear peanut butter," he shouted, bold and triumphant. Milk spilled further across the floor, splattering Daniel's pants. He closed his eyes, ready to count to 3. But before he could ding-dong, the doorbell chimed sharp and clear. Daniel froze. He wasn't expecting much. Maybe a neighbor asking for quiet. Maybe another babysitter who would last no more than 10 minutes. He cracked open the door. A gust of cold air slid in, carrying the smell of butter and flour from inside. On the porch stood a young woman. Her blonde hair was tied back neatly, her breath turning into faint clouds in the chill. A beige sweater hugged her frame, a light trench coat draped softly over it, boots dusted with snow. On her shoulder rested a canvas bag, old but clean, the strap slightly frayed, where hands often held it. "You're Mr. Hayes?" she asked, her voice tinged with the cool of late afternoon. Yeah." Daniel squinted. "And you are Sophia?" She smiled, neither too eager nor shy. I'm here for the babysitting job. For a fleeting moment, Daniel almost said out loud, "You don't look like the others who've come here." Not because she was pretty or tidy, but because there was something unusual about her calm, like the still surface of a winter lake so quiet it made you want to toss a pebble just to see if it would ripple. Before Daniel could invite her in, Theo peeked from behind his father's eyes, bright as though lit from within. "Do you know how to play superheroes?" Sophia knelt down to his level, a few loose strands of hair falling over her cheek. "Of course, but only if I get to be the Red Spider-Man." Theo spun toward Ben. "She knows the rules," and as if to celebrate, Ben's hand slipped. The milk tipped a white stream, splashing across Sophia's leather boots, dripping down the porch step. Daniel flinched, bracing for the awkward apology and quick retreat he had come to expect. But Sophia simply looked down, smiled gently, and pulled a packet of tissues from her canvas bag. "I did say I needed a little bit of mess," she said softly. "Just enough to remind me I'm alive." Theo burst out laughing. Ben, embarrassed, soon joined in. Their laughter cracked open something in the house, lifting some of the heaviness clinging to the wooden beams overhead. Daniel shifted nervously. You're really okay with that?" "It's fine. These boots already have snow on them. A little milk just makes them whiter." Her eyes sparkled playful, but not mocking. "May I borrow a floor cloth?" Within 5 minutes, Sophia was in the kitchen, one knee bent, wiping milk while chatting with the boys. She didn't fuss, didn't act like a martyr, just treated it as the most natural part of the afternoon. Daniel leaned against the fridge, glancing at the magnets that held his kids' scribbled drawings, listening to the soft swish of the damp rag. He felt a twinge of shame at the dirt, but also a flicker of surprise at how quickly the air grew lighter. The boys sat cross-legged on the threshold chins, propped in their hands, watching Sophia scrub as if it were a performance. "Over there? And there too," they called out. Sophia nodded seriously. "Captain Cleanup, reporting for duty." The boys collapsed into giggles. When the last of the milk was gone, Sophia took off her trench coat, hung it neatly, and revealed the soft beige sweater underneath. From her canvas bag, she drew out 2 small picture books, a stack of round, colorful cards, a fabric-covered notebook, and a box of worn markers. "I brought a few things. Not sure if they'll suit these 2 heroes." "Love it," Theo cheered. Ben nodded, spoon still clutched in his hand, as though refusing to surrender just yet. Daniel crossed his arms, trying to keep his tone neutral. "So, have you worked with kids a lot before?" Sophia paused, then nodded. "Not as much as professionals. But I learned quickly. And..." Her eyes flicked between Theo and Ben before landing back on Daniel. "I'm good with feelings." "Feelings?" Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Yes. Kids rarely lack rules. What they often lack is someone who understands what they're feeling." She smiled, not lecturing, but sharing like a cook, revealing the secret to a family soup. "If you name the wave, it settles faster." That line unsettled Daniel. He had never thought of his house in terms of waves. To him, every day was a storm. Storms of meals, storms of bedtime, storms of tantrums. Waves, those sounded gentler, like something you could spot on the horizon. Sophia spread a small mat in the corner of the messy living room, right beside the pillow fort. Sitting cross-legged, she laid the round cards in the middle. Each card showed a simple cartoon face, One smiling, one frowning, one crying, one scowling. "Let's open the door to our feelings, shall we?" she asked, serious yet warm. "What door?" Ben asked, wide-eyed. "The door we can walk through, so we don't get stuck inside our feelings. For example, when the milk spilled." "What did you feel?" "Very happy," Theo shouted. "It looked like snow." Daniel chuckled under his breath, caught off guard by his own smile. Ben hesitated, glancing down at his spoon. "I was scared you'd be mad." Sophia didn't rush to comfort. She held out the crying face card gently. "So maybe a little scared, a little embarrassed." Ben nodded shoulders, relaxing. "And now?" She lifted the smiling face card. Ben grinned and bobbed his head. "See," Sophia said, turning to Daniel and then back to the boys. "When we name it, the feeling softens like a wave rolling back." She didn't make them sit still for a lecture. Instead, she grabbed some masking tape, fastened the blanket into a castle gate, and christened it Fort Pancake. Because she declared solemnly, "We must protect dinner from hungry dinosaurs." Theo whooped with joy. Ben trotted around the room, sneaking glances at his dad for reassurance. Daniel leaned on the doorframe, arms dropping at his sides without realizing it, as though his body knew someone else was finally carrying part of the load. Sophia picked up a slim comic book, opened to the first page, but instead of reading, she spun a story about the very room they sat in. Once upon a time, in a house filled with butter and flour, lived two little knights named Theo and Ben. Each held a magic spoon. These spoons could turn spilled milk into snow laughter, into armor, and... Her gaze slid to Daniel, inviting him in. A carpenter's sighs into cool breezes. The boys roared with laughter. Heat climbed Daniel's ears. He felt exposed, but strangely light. He wasn't being mocked. The story simply drew him inside, reminding him he was a character too, not just the weary water carrier on the sidelines. New rule. Sophia said, her tone dipping a notch into gentle seriousness. "Inside the fort, no one throws food. If a storm of feelings comes..." She held up the deck of emotion cards like a talisman. "We'll breathe like dragons. Dragons puff smoke, not fire that burns the house. Clear, clear." Theo pumped his fist. Ben echoed him, their eyes shining like lanterns. Sophia placed her hand on her stomach, inhaled deeply, then blew out slowly, cheeks puffed like a baby dragon. The boys copied her little bellies, rising and falling breaths, hissing like kittens. Within 3 breaths, the room quieted an unfamiliar calm, simple yet profound, like a warm cloth draped over a cold wooden chair. In the kitchen corner, Daniel poured water, listening with new ears to the sound of it filling the glass. He glanced at the chipped mug, once his wife's, now his, for every dawn's coffee. On the fridge hung a photo of him cradling the twins in the hospital the day they were born. His heart swung like a roller coaster, joy at their laughter, dread of tomorrow, shame at the mess, gratitude for the sudden gentleness filling the house. He said nothing, but his face softened, his shoulders dropped. "What's for dinner?" Sophia asked. Frozen pizza." Daniel admitted embarrassment in his voice. "A safe plan." She nodded like a strategist. "While we wait for the oven, let's spin the wheel of choices." She held up a hand-drawn circle divided into 6 slices. "Breathe like a dragon. Hug a pillow. Count to 10. Jump 10 times. Tell a funny thing. Ask for help." "What does ask for help mean?" Theo asked. "It means when things feel hard, you say, I need help. You don't always have to be strong." As she said it, her eyes brushed past Daniel, not deliberate, but enough to catch him. His throat tightened. "Let's try it. Ben, you spin." Ben's peanut buttery finger flicked the wheel. The arrow landed on tell a funny thing. All three looked at each other. "I'll tell," Ben said. "Today, Daddy wore socks that don't match." Daniel looked down, one gray, one blue, and laughed. He started to explain, "Because I was busy, but stopped letting the laughter have its full moment." The oven beeped, its red light turning amber. The smell of cheese blossomed, mingling with butter and peanut butter, creating a scent of messy but trying family. Sophia washed her hands, scrubbing the milk off her boots. Ben followed with a small towel, serious as a soldier. Theo stretched across the couch, with a pillow, eyes tracking Sophia like a fan, studying a new player, waiting to see if she belonged on the team. "All right," Sophia tapped the table. "After dinner, we'll have a superhero mission: clean up Fort Pancake before Dad finishes the last dish." She looked at Daniel, smiling. "Shall I set the timer for 5 minutes?" "You can set it for however long you want." Daniel said, a thin smile tugging unexpectedly at his lips. "As long as they listen. They're knights. Knights keep promises." Sophia leaned in, whispered a secret code to the boys. Both nodded solemnly, like woodpeckers. Dinner wasn't as noisy as usual. There were still exaggerated sounds, cheese crumbs falling on cushions, and one slice turned into Ben's pretend shield, but no shouting. When Theo tried to grab the slice with more olives, Sophia touched the table lightly. "What does the wheel say?" Theo glanced at the circle, blew a dragon's breath, then whispered, "Ask for help." "Can I have more olives?" Daniel, astonished, opened the cupboard, smiling, before he even realized it. After dinner, Sophia set the timer. The boys darted into the fort, dragging blankets and pillows, tidying with surprising focus. It wasn't perfect, but it was effort. From the sink, Daniel heard their countdown: 3, 4, 5, followed by a triumphant "done right" as the timer beeped. Sophia clapped just enough, not overpraising like a coach who knows the value of measured encouragement. Then came story time. Sophia didn't pick a colorful book. She chose a slim, worn paperback, The Tale of the Dragon Who Learned to Bake Bread. She shifted her voice part, deep part playful, until the dragon stepped off the page. Instead of burning forests, he learned to breathe just enough fire to toast bread golden without charring it. Because dragons have feelings too. She explained, eyes resting quietly on the boys, and feelings come with dials you can turn. Ben's head slumped onto Theo's shoulder. Their eyelids grew heavy. Daniel stood at the doorway, the spot he liked most because it gave him a view of the living room and a glimpse of the kitchen, like a sentry watching over his small kingdom. For the first time in weeks, he wasn't counting chores, left undone orders, waiting for his carpentry shop, or the dread of calling yet another babysitter. He was just standing, listening, breathing. "You're not from around here, are you?" he asked softly, not wanting to break the bubble of calm. "No," Sophia replied, gathering the emotion cards, smiling. "I just needed a change." "And working with kids?" Daniel asked, clumsy as a big kid himself. "I don't have certificates," she admitted, "but I use respect and listening. Kids are sensitive, you know that. They'll tell you how to be with them if you slow down long enough." "Slow down," Daniel repeated, tasting the unfamiliar sweetness of the phrase. Sophia glanced at the clock, then at the dozing boys. I could come tomorrow morning. I make decent coffee. But I need one condition. Daniel raised a brow. In this house, Sophia said her voice meant for children and adults alike. Whenever someone says, I need help, we answer, I'm here. Silence stretched. In that pause, Daniel saw himself reflected in the glass door. Dark circles under his eyes, stubble rough on his jaw, broad shoulders sagging. He saw his children breathing softly, and he saw the young woman boots, still marked with milk hands, smelling faintly of soap, bringing with her a peculiar kind of order, the order of kindness. Okay, he said low, but steady. I'm here. Sophia nodded, gentle and firm. She draped a blanket over the boys, leaving their tiny feet poking out from pajama cuffs. The standing lamp cast a warm circle, like an egg yolk whisked with milk, the color of comfort. Snow fell lightly outside. The oven ticked as it cooled. Before leaving, Sophia leaned close, whispering as though not to disturb a fragile spell. I can't promise I won't spill more milk, but I promise I'll laugh first and clean after. Daniel chuckled, truly. Chuckled not the weary exhale he had grown used to. Then, see you tomorrow. The door closed so softly, he almost missed the sound of the lock clicking. He stood a moment longer, breathing in flour and cheese, staring at the tidy remains of Fort Pancake, at his boys curled like puppies. Strange, he thought. For months he had fought storms. It never once occurred to him that someone might walk in and simply choose to laugh with the children. Tomorrow would still bring milk flour spoons and mess. But tonight, among the flour handprints on the cabinets, there was a new mark, warmer, gentler, the mark of hope. And in that hope, for the first time in so long, Daniel heard his own voice, soft but certain, speaking to the house. I'm here. Chapter 2. A new rhythm in the wooden house. The first mornings with Sophia in the wooden house were filled with the same familiar chaos, the sweet smell of cereal, the clink of spoons against bowls, the thud of small feet racing across the floor. But now, within that noise, a new rhythm pulsed softer, gentler. Daniel still woke at 5, brewing bitter coffee to keep himself alert. Yet when he stepped into the living room, he saw a sight he never imagined: Sophia kneeling on the rug, the boys doubled over with laughter, and between chairs draped with blankets, a superhero fortress taking shape. The once cramped room had become a castle of colors. Sophia tied one end of a blanket to a chair handle, wedged a pillow to hold it up, and whenever the fabric slipped, she laughed. Oh no, the wall is collapsing. Quick rescue team. Theo rushed to hold the blanket. Ben carried more pillows to reinforce it. Daniel stood in the doorway, the smell of pine wood from his workshop still clinging to his hands, astonished. He couldn't remember the last time his sons worked together instead of fighting. Inside the fortress, Sophia opened a fabric-covered notebook. On its pages, neat rounded handwriting listed simple prompts. She began to tell a story in a lilting voice. Once upon a time, there was a dragon who didn't know how to breathe fire for battle, but he was very good at baking bread. The boys' mouths dropped open, then burst into giggles as Sophia puffed her cheeks, pretending to blow out smoky dragon breath. A dragon? Baking bread? Ben asked, eyes wide. Yes, Sophia nodded. Dragons get hungry too. Instead of burning forests, he learned to bake bread for the whole village, and whenever he felt sad, he'd take a deep breath, and the oven would glow, filling the air with warmth and the smell of fresh bread. Daniel realized then that her voice carried a strange magic, soothing the house not with loud lessons or forced order, but with a small story that drew his boys in until they forgot to quarrel. He sank into a wooden chair, the coffee cup steady in his hand for the first time in months, his back easing against the chair, as though his body finally remembered how to rest. Sophia didn't just tell stories. She wove games into every moment. Every night must have magic bread. Who wants to be the dragon's baker? Instantly, Theo grabbed a plastic lid for bread, while Ben stirred the air with a spoon. The room filled with their laughter. Daniel smiled, without realizing it, a rare, unguarded smile that surprised even him. By late afternoon, sunlight streamed through the small window, painting stripes of gold across the floor. At his work table, Daniel tried to focus on fitting wooden joints together, but his gaze drifted again and again toward the living room. There sat Sophia, cross-legged between his sons, helping them bake dragon bread on an invisible tray. As the boys blew out imaginary heat, Sophia's laughter lit her whole face. And in that moment, Daniel felt his chest grow lighter. Since the day his wife walked out, he hadn't once felt this house alive. Normally, children's laughter was broken by his shouting, by toys crashing to the floor, by the heavy silence that followed. But today, their laughter rose like a melody in rhythm. For the first time in months, he exhaled, not because life was suddenly easy, but because someone had stepped into the chaos and chosen to stay. Sophia lifted her head and caught Daniel's eyes in the doorway. She said nothing, only smiled a quiet message. You're not alone anymore. And from that moment on, the wooden house found a new rhythm of life. Chapter 3. A Midnight Paper Crown. That night, wind swept in from the low forest behind the wooden house, rattling the wind chime Daniel had hung the Christmas before. Inside, the rooms were washed in the pale gold of a floor lamp in the living room. Daniel had carried Theo and Ben to bed, pulled the blankets up to their chests, tucked the worn-eared bear beside them, and whispered the familiar words, "I'm here." The door clicked shut. The hallway settled. Only the slow tick of the wall clock kept time. Sophia gathered the pillows from the afternoon's fortress and stacked the blankets into neat piles like bricks. On the coffee table, the round emotion cards lay in a small heap, smiles face down against frowns, like siblings sharing a bed. She bent to pick up a scrap of paper on the floor, a half-finished crown cut from cardboard, its zigzags, uneven tape slapped on at an angle, a shaky felt-tip scrawl across it. Crown for Ben. She paused as the afternoon replayed itself. Ben had clung to the new sitter's neck, breathless, as he told her about a prince in the movie with a glittering crown, while he had only a torn knit cap. In that moment, his eyes had searched hers, not for things, but for the feeling of being seen. "Can you make one?" Ben had asked, half challenge, half hope. Sophia had smiled. "Let me try tomorrow." Now it was tomorrow, before dawn had come. She dimmed the lights, leaving only a soft pool of gold over the small dining table. After washing her hands, she rummaged through her canvas bag and set out a fabric-bound notebook, a new pair of scissors, a roll of washi tape, a plastic ruler, a few pieces of colored board cut from cereal boxes, and a stubby pencil. Beside them, her phone sat on the wooden stand Daniel had built the screen, catching her eyes as it lit up. YouTube's search bar waited. She typed careful and deliberate the way a person writes after too many emails, how to make paper crown for kids. Video titles filled the screen. 5 easy paper crowns, DIY cardboard crown, in 10 minutes, kids party craft. Sophia tapped the first one. Bright music burst forth, while a pair of hands snipped precise zigzags, as if they'd done it 1,000 times. She laid the cardboard on the table and drew a straight line. The pencil wavered. She breathed in and called up the rule she'd taught the boys: breathe like a dragon. It's okay, she murmured. Even bread-baking dragons burn a batch. Her first cut leaned a little left. She tried to tape the edge bumpy. She opened the second video. The instructor used hot glue. No hot glue in this kitchen. She shrugged and smiled. We are thrifty dragons. She found a little school glue in the junk drawer and dotted it carefully along the seam. The clock hand crept past 11. Sophia tried to keep the zigzags even, but on the third cut, the point went soft, like a baby tooth about to fall out. She set it down, inhaled, and switched to a new sheet. She slowed the video to half speed, propped the phone, close left hand, holding right hand cutting. The blades whispered through cardboard in a steady hush, like fine rain on a tin roof. Attempt 1 a miss. Attempt 2 cleaner cuts, crooked join. Attempt 3, she sharpened the V-points and the board cracked. She laughed, no bitterness in it, gentle, like a mother who singed the first tray of cookies. She swept the scraps into a paper bag and smoothed the table. Her phone buzzed. Trial progress, 45 days remaining. The cold line of text slipped like a draft along her neck. She tapped it away and returned to the video's hands shaping a crown. I can do this, she told herself, then added lower, because Ben will wear it and he will smile. She tried the scissors in her left hand. The dining light drew a pale stripe across the board, revealing the grain. She scored the edge with her thumbnail. A tip from the 4th video softened the board before cutting to keep it from splitting. This time, the zigzags came out like little waves, their tips slightly rounded, friendly to the eye. She let out a small, private cheer. She measured Ben's head from memory, 1.5 hands, plus 2 fingers. Add 1 more point for safety, she said softly. For the join, she taped the inside with washi and covered the outside with a skinny strip of board to hide the seam, a new trick. She pressed the edge and held, counting, like the boys waiting on hot pizza. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. At 10 Mississippi, the seam held firm. The clock read 12:37. She took a sip of water, her finger tracing the fine crackle in the ceramic rim, remembering her mother's dry hands years ago, the way they rubbed Sophia's back after first failures. Try again, darling. Slower this time. The memory stung her eyes, but no tears fell. Tonight tears would warp the board. Tonight belonged to patience. She opened 1 more video. Decorate your crown ideas. Those crowns glittered with sequins and metallic paper. She glanced around the small kitchen. No glitter, no beads. The junk drawer offered star stickers, a roll of last year's gold gift wrap, and a box of fading markers. She smiled. A thrifty dragon, but a clever one. She cut narrow strips of the gift wrap and lined the crown's points like a rim of light. The gold caught the lamp's glow, bright but not gaudy. At each point, she placed a small star, In the center, she cut a tiny oval, wrapped it in deep red paper, and drew a little loaf of bread, the dragon baker emblem the boys loved. On the inner rim, she wrote in marker, Prince Ben Brave and Kind. The first time, Kind drifted crooked the K a little wobbly. She exhaled, set the crown aside, cut a fresh strip, and wrote it again, lighter pressure, steadier hand. This time, the words lay straight as rails. She glued the new piece over the old covering, the clumsy start. Beauty, she murmured, is sometimes a skillful patch. A sharp paper edge nicked her knuckle as she pressed the seam. A slender red line appeared. Sophia, startled, slipped her finger into her mouth, the faint iron taste on her tongue. She washed up and covered the cut with a kid's bandage blue with a tiny superhero. She looked at it and laughed. Ben's going to love this detail. Then she went back to place the last small stars. 120. The first crown was finished. She tried it on, peering at her reflection in the glass of the back door. A little skewed, her head was bigger than Ben's. She took it off and tightened the join with a fingernail-sized tab. Her heartbeat fell into measure with the wall clock, a duet in the same key. The night's quiet no longer felt like the chill of loneliness. It sounded like a kitchen after a party with one last person humming at the sink. Old friends would have been surprised to see her now. Sophia Carter of Glass Tower meetings, charity galas, writing lessons, and French, sitting in a small town kitchen, cutting cereal box zigzags and pasting stars from last year's wrapping paper. But she had never felt more perfectly placed. She thought of Ben's smile when the dragon baked bread. You couldn't find that smile at a gala or a meeting. It lived here in a house that smelled of milk and flour. She decided to make another, just in case Theo asked in the morning, "And what about me?" The second time, everything flowed. Quick cuts, clean seams. The words, Prince Theo. Quick and gentle, settled neatly in place. In the center, instead of bread, she drew a little wheel, the wheel of choices, a reminder that anger comes with a dozen ways back to calm. 10-2. Sophia leaned back in the wooden chair and stretched until her spine popped softly. She dimmed the lights again, leaving the smallest glow. The two crowns rested side by side on the table like paper boats waiting for dawn. She closed her eyes for a moment, careful not to fall fully asleep. When she looked again, the minute hand had ticked forward. She swept the scraps, wiped the table, and pulled the curtain part way. Before leaving, she returned and slipped a note beside the crowns, baked with patience, sprinkled with love. Dawn came as a gray-blue smudge beyond the kitchen window. Daniel shuffled in the floorboards, creaking in their familiar voice. He reached for his chipped coffee mug. The table looked unusually tidy. His eyes fell on two small glints. Crowns. He stopped. The kettle hovered in his hand, steam curling around his wrist, a heat he didn't feel. On the inner rim, the marker letters spelled his boys' names. He swallowed something nameless, rising like steam. He knew at once where they came from the patient hands of the young woman who'd read stories last night, the one who laughed first and cleaned later. Sophia stepped into the kitchen at the same time, hair hastily tied, faint shadows beneath bright eyes. A blue superhero bandage wrapped her finger. Daniel noticed, paused there for a beat, and lifted his gaze to her face. "You were up. Late." "It's fine." She rasped softly, the voice of a gently sleepless person. I just baked 2 crowns. Daniel laughed, truly laughed for the second time in 24 hours. He poured coffee and slid the chipped mug toward her. "Thank you," he said, quiet, as if to the kitchen, the morning, and the person who'd changed the house's rhythm. Small feet pattered in the hall. Theo burst in first, his hair sticking up like a tiny broom. Ben shuffled after sleep, still in his eyes, clutching the worn bear. "Smells good," Theo declared, though he'd never tasted coffee. Both boys froze at the sight of the crowns. "Oh," Ben breathed the word, stretching like spun sugar. He reached out, then pulled back, afraid to break it. Is this for me?" Sophia nodded. Prince Ben of milk and laughter. "Want to try?" Ben looked up at her, blinking fast, then sat very straight like a princess about to be crowned. Sophia lifted the crown, brushed the rim one last time, and set it on his headlight as a blessing. It fit snugly, not crooked. Ben turned to the glass door where his crowned reflection stood guard beside his loyal, threadbare bear. 1 second, 2, 3. His eyes flew wide, his mouth stretched to his ears. He hopped down and thumped around the table. "You did it. You made a real crown." Theo bounced. Me too. Sophia held up the second. "Prince Theo, swift as the wind, gentle as rain," she proclaimed, as if before a court. Theo puffed his chest and bowed his head. He tilted to study himself in the glass. "Do I look like a dragon?" "You do," Daniel said warmly, steady as a beam, like a dragon who bakes bread. In the morning light, the kitchen gleamed with small things, the gift-wrapped gilt lining each point, the star stickers, the blue superhero bandage on Sophia's hand, the thin steam floating from the kettle, the faint scent of toast from the machine Daniel had switched on without thinking. A tiny children's song chirped from Ben's old speaker, a ribbon tying the moment together. Ben spun back and suddenly flung his arms around Sophia. He hugged her tight chin, pressed to the beige sweater at her stomach, and said in that nasal, too happy child's voice, "You're our crown maker." The 2 words crown maker, simple and magical, laid a new title on a woman building a new life. Sophia hugged him back, her hand, light on his small back, like a palm on a bird. "I only mend the magic," she whispered. "The magic is your smiles." Daniel watched a current of calm moving through him like warm air. For a split second, he saw an earlier version of himself, a man who believed effort alone was enough, then learned some things can't be carried alone. His eyes flicked to the wall calendar, the red circle around the next delivery date. The pressure was still there. Tuition, electric bills, lumber. But for this moment, the numbers stepped back. Laughter stepped forward. "Thank you," he said again. Clearer this time, a promise in it. "Thank you for staying up just to make these." Sophia shook her head slightly. "Not just for these. For Ben. For the whole house," she said, then turned to the boys and slipped into the crisp tone of an announcer. "Now then, dear princes, the crown prototypes are complete. This morning's mission: defend Fort Pancake and do not spill milk." "No spilling," they chorused, each holding a crown's rim with one hand. Then they sprinted toward the blanket fort, their small feet drumming like an opening snare roll. Sophia watched them go, her hand drifting to her chest, where her heart beat a new tempo. She remembered the earlier email trial progress, 45 days remaining. The days left in a test she'd once thought a cold joke from a powerful father. Now the test had an unexpected answer, not hot glue and shimmer paper, but a superhero bandage, star stickers, and 3 words, "Dad is here." Daniel topped off the coffee and nudged the chipped mug toward her again, a quiet initiation. "You." He hesitated, then smiled, "Crown maker." Sophia laughed, her blonde hair catching the early light like a spill of sun across the table. "Don't make me proud," she teased, eyes bright and hard to steady. Breakfast was simple toast, peanut butter, a few strawberries still cool from the fridge. Theo set the strawberry slices on plates with careful hands. Ben blew across his milk like a dragon practicing flame control. Every small movement carried effort, the effort not to spill, to slow down, to look at each other and smile. When the crowns slid askew, Sophia straightened them gently, like tuning notes in a family symphony. As Daniel shrugged into his coat for the workshop, he stopped at the door and looked back, 2 princes eating breakfast in a fortress, a crown maker dabbing crumbs with a damp cloth, the sun nosing across the window pane. He drew in a long breath and held it to keep the peace a little longer in his lungs. Then he said to himself and to the house, "Today will be okay." The wooden door opened, cold air swept in and bowed out again. Sophia picked up 2 empty plastic containers and winked at the boys. Time for Dragon Bakery training. Today's lesson, stirring batter without splatters. "Stir soft, like a dragon breathes," Theo corrected. Ben raised his spoon like a sword. As laughter rolled out of the living room, Sophia glanced back at the table where the crowns, sometimes worn, sometimes set down, carefully rested. A small tear along the inner rim, the scar of that first attempt, made her smile. Beauty, she remembered, is the art of a clever patch. Love is the patience that does the mending. She gathered scissors board and taped the tools of a craftswoman of feelings and stepped into the room where 2 boys were waiting. Last night she baked with patience. This morning she dusted everything with a thin layer of love. And just so when Ben turned back, his crown slipping a little, his cheeks pink as fresh strawberries, he ran to hug her again and whispered in her ear, soft enough for only 2 people to hear, yet wide enough to fill a life, "I'm smiling." A violet crescent of feeling drifted down soft as a feather. In that moment, every test dissolved. What remained was a kitchen messy in just the right way. 2 princes in paper crowns, a carpenter learning to breathe slowly, and a crown maker learning to stay. Chapter 4: Through the Fever and the Lullaby. A bitter winter night wrapped itself around the small town, the wind whistling through the cracks of the wooden house windows. The kitchen still carried the faint warmth of chicken soup Sophia had cooked earlier yet. Tonight the air felt heavier than usual. Ben lay curled up on the sofa, his cheeks flushed, eyes hazy, letting out small whimpers now and then. Sophia placed her slender hand on his forehead, heat radiating against her palm until her chest tightened. "So hot," she whispered. A flicker of panic rose, but she smothered it quickly with resolve. She dipped a small towel into cool water, wrung it carefully, and pressed it gently against his burning skin. Theo sat close by, worry etched across his little face. "Sophia, is Ben going to be okay?" She turned, offering a steady smile. "He'll be fine, my little hero. He just needs to rest. We'll keep watch over him together, all right." That evening, Sophia never left Ben's side. She refreshed the towel again and again, coaxed him to sip small mouthfuls of water, and sometimes hummed soft lullabies tunes she couldn't quite place, maybe carried from her own childhood, from memories of a mother blurred with time. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A message sent to Daniel. "Don't worry. I'll take care of Ben. Focus on your work. I've got everything here." Daniel read it in the workshop tools in his hand. He stopped and stared at the screen for a long while. Normally, he would have dropped everything, rushed home immediately. Since his wife had left, no one else knew how to care for his sons. But this time, those 4 words, "I've got everything," slowed his steps. Inside him stirred a fragile trust enough to keep him working a few hours more. Night deepened. Sophia sat at Ben's bedside. He drifted in and out of fevered dreams, mumbling, "Don't leave me." Her heart clenched. She clasped his tiny hand, her voice trembling as she whispered, "I'm not going anywhere. Sleep, Ben. I'm right here." The clock struck 1 in the morning. Sophia's eyes burned, but she didn't move. She finished a small tale of the bread-baking dragon, her voice soft as a lullaby, until Ben's breathing steadied. Sweat beaded gently on his brow, and the fever began to ease. Exhaustion pulled at her. She slumped forward, resting her head on the edge of the bed, her hand still gripping his. The dim glow of the lamp cast a tender light across her loose hair falling over her forehead. The door eased open. Daniel stepped inside, boots dusted with sawdust coat still carrying the cold wind. He had rushed home as soon as he could. What he saw made him stop in his tracks. On the small bed, Ben slept peacefully, his forehead cool and dry. Beside him, Sophia had fallen asleep too, her face marked by fatigue, yet her hand clung to the boy's, as if afraid to let go. Daniel stood still, his chest filling with feelings, both heavy and light. Heavy because he saw this young woman carrying burdens that should have been his. Light because for the first time in so long he saw his child cared for with such devotion. Quietly, he stepped closer, pulling a blanket to drape over Sophia's shoulders. As the fabric brushed her, she stirred her lips, murmuring in her sleep, "Don't worry, Ben. I'm here." Daniel's throat tightened. Those weren't the words of someone just doing a job. They were the words of someone who truly loved. He stepped back, leaning against the doorframe, his gaze lingering on Sophia. And for the first time since she entered this house, Daniel realized she was no longer just a babysitter. She had become part of the house's breath, part of the boy's peaceful sleep. And in that quiet moment, Daniel understood the thing he feared most wasn't the chaos. It was the thought of one day losing Sophia's presence in this home. Chapter 5, Birthday Pancakes. That late afternoon, snow drifted softly past the window, each flake touching the wooden eaves, before melting, leaving tiny drops of water sliding down the gutter. In the small kitchen, Daniel wrestled with an old cast-iron pan whose non-stick coating had long worn off. The faint smell of browned butter filled the air, blending with vanilla. He flipped carefully, trying to keep each pancake round, though they always landed a little lopsided. Beside him, Theo and Ben wore aprons too long for their legs, bustling about with all the excitement in the world. "Dad, I washed the strawberries," Ben announced, proudly holding up a bowl of bright red fruit, still beaded with water, as though he'd uncovered a hidden treasure. "And I got the cream." Theo huffed, plunking a tub of whipped cream onto the table, one cheek streaked with white foam. Daniel laughed, wiping his hands on his apron and ruffling both their heads. He didn't say it aloud, but a warm rush filled him. It had been so long since this house had held a secret plot as sweet as this. It had all begun a few nights earlier. While they were tidying up, Sophia had let slip that her birthdays were rarely celebrated. She had smiled lightly, almost as if hiding the truth. I usually just eat pancakes by myself as a small tradition. I've always thought pancakes at night should count as an official holiday. Her words had lingered in Daniel's ears like seeds taking root. He pretended not to notice, but later in bed, he couldn't shake the image of her under the lamp eyes, glinting as she spoke about pancakes at night. It had been a long time since he'd met someone who craved something so small, so tender, and even longer since he'd thought about surprising anyone. That morning, after Sophia took the boys to the park, Daniel slipped down to the corner grocery. He bought flour butter vanilla and a box of strawberries. He remembered her saying she liked them cold. He added a bar of dark chocolate planning to melt it the simplest way he knew, in the little wooden steamer in his workshop. Back home, he hid the supplies in a cupboard, then bent down to whisper to Theo and Ben today's a secret. The three of us are going to do something special for Sophia. The boys' eyes went wide. A superhero mission, Dad, yes. Daniel nodded. Operation Birthday Pancake. They cheered, clapped, and promised to keep the secret like they were guarding the code to a superhero base. That night, while Sophia read with the boys in the living room, Daniel slipped into the kitchen. He lit the stove, his hands trembling. He hadn't cooked anything this fancy in years. Flour dusted the table in white streaks. He mixed the batter. Too thin, added more flour. Too thick, added milk. Theo peeked in, whispering, "Dad, should we call Sophia to help?" "No," Daniel said firmly, pressing his lips together. "This is a surprise. We can do it." Ben leaned over the bowl, frowning. "Looks more like glue than batter." Daniel chuckled, patting his son's head. "Just wait. Even glue can become pancakes." They kept at it. The oven warmed, butter sizzled. The first few came out scorched at the edges. Daniel hid them quickly, but the boys insisted on tasting. They chewed, made faces, then nodded bravely. Tastes like superhero food. By 8 o'clock, the boys were cutting paper letters from the craft drawer, uneven and mismatched in size. Daniel helped them tape the pieces across the window into a wobbly banner, "Happy Birthday, Sophia." With no real candles, they set 2 stubby Christmas leftovers into chipped mugs. The flames flickered, casting golden shadows on the walls. When Sophia came down the stairs to fetch water, she froze. The kitchen was transformed. No clutter, but a table glowing with candlelight. A tower of pancakes, a bowl of fresh strawberries, a dish of melted chocolate, and a pitcher of whipped cream waited. On the window, the crooked letters shimmered in the candlelight. "Happy Birthday," 3 voices rang together. Sophia stood still, eyes wide then glistening. She covered her mouth, overcome. Daniel scratched the back of his neck, embarrassed. I know it's not perfect, but you once said pancakes at night should be a holiday. So, tonight we try." Sophia sat down, her hand trembling on the fork. "You?" Remembered Daniel shrugged, eyes shy but steady. "I remembered you, like strawberries cold, and chocolate doesn't count unless it melts." The simple words undid her. She couldn't recall the last time anyone had listened to her that closely. At home, Her father had cared only about numbers contracts. At parties, people remembered her dress, not her words. Yet here, in a carpenter's wooden house, someone had held onto the smallest details. She cut a bite of pancake, dipped it in chocolate, added a berry. The sweetness spread across her tongue, but what caught in her throat was the feeling of being seen, of being understood. "This is the best birthday I've had in years," she whispered. Ben clapped. "Make a wish. You have to make a wish and blow the candles." Theo nodded solemnly. "But don't say it out loud, or it won't come true." Sophia closed her eyes. In the darkness behind them, her wish wasn't grand. Just that this moment might linger a little longer. That this laughter might stay in the small kitchen for many days to come. She blew. Smoke curled up as the boys cheered. Daniel watched a strange yet familiar warmth rising in his chest, as if the house had rediscovered its long-lost glow. That night, Sophia lay in her small room, hugging her pillow tight. In the dark, she still saw candle flames dancing, still heard the boys' laughter, still felt Daniel's quiet, steady gaze. For the first time in years, her birthday meant something. Not because of gifts or glittering wishes, but because someone had listened and turned her smallest joys into reality. She whispered into the night, as if writing a note in the dark, "Thank you for seeing me." And from that moment in Sophia's heart, the little wooden house was no longer just a place of work. It was becoming home. Chapter 6. Secrets in the Shadows. The little wooden house had begun to breathe with a strange new warmth. Theo and Ben's laughter filled the mornings, the scent of coffee mingled with butter from the kitchen, and Sophia's gentle presence made Daniel feel as though his burdens were finally being shared. Yet in the shadows of this new happiness, small signs began to slip through secrets never spoken aloud. One weekend evening, the four of them stopped at a roadside diner. The wooden table was worn, the menu scrawled in chalk on a blackboard. When the waitress teased them about dessert, Sophia smiled and answered without thinking in flawless French, "Un petit gâteau au chocolat, s'il vous plaît." The table fell silent. The waitress nodded, impressed. Daniel frowned. "You studied in France?" he asked. Sophia froze for a heartbeat, her eyes flickering with unease before recovering with practiced calm. "Yes. A boarding school. Just a habit," she said lightly. Her answer sounded casual, but to Daniel it landed heavy. A young woman who had claimed she only came here for simple work now revealed a polished elegance that didn't fit. A few days later, while lining up shoes by the door, Daniel noticed her boots. Fine leather, meticulous stitching, a luxury brand he'd only seen in magazines at the barber shop. Shoes like that didn't belong in a small town like this. He brushed the leather with his thumb, remembering the worn-out boots his customers usually brought in for repair. The comparison tightened something in his chest. How could an ordinary babysitter afford something so extravagant? Late one night, carrying Ben upstairs, Daniel passed by the kitchen. A faint blue glow spilled from the table. Sophia sat hunched over, eyes fixed on her phone, her finger trembling slightly as she read an email. Before he could retreat, bold letters flashed across the screen. "Trial progress, 45 days remaining." The floor creaked. Sophia startled quickly, locking the screen and slipping the phone into a drawer as if hiding a sin. When she looked up, her face was carefully composed. "You're still awake?" Daniel's voice was low. "I was getting water." "But what was that email?" She forced a small smile. Just old business, nothing important. He said no more. But suspicion had already taken root. The weight grew heavier until he could no longer stay silent. One evening, after the boys had fallen asleep, he found Sophia sitting alone at the kitchen table. The yellow lamp lit her figure, her shadow stretched long across the wooden floor. He crossed his arms, his voice hard. "How much longer were you planning to hide the truth from me?" Sophia flinched, her eyes widening. For a moment, her calm mask shattered. I don't know what you mean." Daniel stepped closer, his voice sharp. Fluent French, designer boots, strange emails. None of that fits. "Tell me, Sophia, who are you really?" Silence pressed down on the room. Her hands trembled as she laced her fingers together. Then, as if she could no longer run, she drew a shaky breath. "My father is Richard Carter?" Daniel froze. The name rang familiar. An infamous real estate tycoon, the cold-hearted millionaire often splashed across newspapers. A man so far from this humble house that the connection felt impossible. Sophia's voice quivered, yet carried resolve. "He wants me to inherit the company. But before that, I had to prove myself 60 days living as an ordinary person. No money, no privilege. This babysitting job was part of the trial." Daniel staggered back, his expression dark. "So everything you've done here was just an experiment?" Sophia broke into sobs, shaking her head. "Maybe at first, but not anymore. Theo Ben, and you're not part of a test. You're real. Every hug, every bedtime story, every night I sat by Ben's side, those were real." Daniel laughed bitterly, the sound hollow in the quiet kitchen. "Real. From the moment you walked into this house, every word was part of your father's plan. I trusted you. My boys trusted you. And now you tell me it was all real." Sophia stepped forward, tears streaming. "I was afraid you'd push me away if you knew. I've never found a place like this before. I want to stay, not for the trial, but because I love the boys. And I love you." Daniel turned his back, shoulders rigid, his voice breaking. "I've lost too much already to lies. I won't let my children become someone's experiment again." Sophia reached for his hand, but he pulled away. "I believed you," he said, voice raw. "And the boys believed you. You turned their love into part of your father's game. Family is not a laboratory, Sophia." The words fell like stone, crushing the air between them. Sophia spun away, stumbling up the stairs. Footsteps pounded, the scrape of a small suitcase, then the slam of a door, leaving the kitchen hollow with pain. Daniel stood still, fists clenched, staring into nothing. Inside him, anger and grief collided. But beneath it all pulsed the heaviest feeling of all loss. Upstairs, Theo and Ben crouched behind their door, eyes wet with tears. They had heard everything. The house fell silent. Daniel sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. The wind howled through the cracks, sending icy drafts across the floor. For the first time in months, the house felt empty again. And in his mind echoed her final words. "I want to stay, not because of the trial, but because I love." But now, all of it had vanished into the shadows. Daniel's trust lay shattered, replaced by the heavy ache of betrayal. This was the breaking point the night Sophia walked away, and the little family slipped back into aching emptiness. Chapter 7. The House Without Laughter. 3 days after Sophia left the wooden house, felt like an empty shell. The kitchen still smelled of coffee, of wood shavings, of hurriedly spilled milk. but the soft humming was gone. The pair of hands that could turn chaos into play were gone. Daniel tried to fill the void. He made pancakes for breakfast, told superhero stories at bedtime, even let the boys jump on the sofa. But the laughter never rang the same. It would rise, then die quickly, leaving behind a silence that stretched too long. Each time, Daniel looked at the sofa, where Sophia had once sat, knitting with the boys. A sharp ache pierced him. He never admitted it out loud, but her absence had left an emptiness, not only for the children, but for him as well. Theo was the first to say it. "Daddy, when is Sophia coming back?" Daniel pressed his lips together, silent. He wanted to give them a gentle lie, but no words came. Ben spoke up, voice trembling. She wasn't pretending. She told stories when she was tired. She made my crown and baked for us. I think she's the real Sophia. Ours. Daniel lowered his head, pulling both boys into his arms. A heavy space grew inside his chest. He had pushed Sophia away out of fear of deception, but he couldn't deny what she had done was too genuine to fake. One afternoon, Daniel found Theo and Ben huddled at the table, busy with paper and pencils, whispering with determined eyes. "What are you two working on?" he asked. Theo looked up, pencil in hand, his voice steady. "We're writing a letter to Mr. Carter. He has to know Sophia is our family." Daniel froze. On the page lay shaky letters stretching across white space. The first line wobbled, but clear. "Dear Mr. Carter, we don't know about business, but Sophia made us breakfast, read us stories, and held our hands when we were scared. She wasn't pretending. She is our family." Ben added a crooked heart at the bottom, carefully scrawling, "Please don't take her away." Daniel held the paper, his vision blurring. He had never believed in the power of children's words, but now each stroke felt like a needle straight into his chest. The next day, he quietly took the boys to the town's post office. The letter was folded into an envelope, its front scribbled with clumsy innocence to Mr. Richard Carter. Very important. The clerk chuckled at the childish address, but Daniel did not. He laid the envelope on the counter, a fragile hope stirring inside him. Would a cold real estate tycoon, a man who lived on billion-dollar deals, ever pause to read a letter full of spelling mistakes from children? In a skyscraper office in Manhattan, the tiny letter slipped into a mountain of papers. A secretary almost tossed it aside, but the bold purple words, "Very important," made her place it on Richard Carter's desk. He opened it with the detached habit of a businessman. His eyes skimmed the lines, but the more he read, the slower his heart beat. These clumsy words spoke of no profits, no contracts, only of breakfast, made with care, a comforting hug, in sickness, a story whispered before sleep. Richard Carter, a man used to calculating everything in numbers and gain, sat still. For one rare moment, the iron wall around his heart cracked. He pictured his daughter not at a press conference, not in a boardroom, but in a small wooden house in the sound of two children's laughter. Back in the small town, Daniel knew nothing of what unfolded far away. He only saw the bright hope shining in his son's eyes as they slipped the letter into the mailbox. He could not bring himself to crush it, even if he himself didn't believe in miracles. That night, the house remained quiet. But through the wind, whistling at the windows, Daniel heard Theo whisper, "Mr. Carter will understand. Because we wrote with our hearts, Daniel closed his eyes, pulling both boys close, and deep inside, he prayed for something he had never dared believe before, that sometimes innocence itself had the power to shake even the hardest heart. The trembling childlike letter, "Sophia is our family," became the first knock against the steel wall around Richard Carter's heart. Chapter 8. A teddy bear and a park bench. Late spring sunlight spilled gold across the grass, a soft breeze carrying the scent of wildflowers through the small town park. Children's laughter filled the air, feet pattering voices calling soap bubbles floating like tiny rainbows. On an old wooden bench beneath a maple tree, Sophia sat with a circle of neighborhood kids. She spread a checkered blanket, laid out crayons, colored paper, and a few worn storybooks. Her smile was gentle as she showed them how to draw hearts. Then she asked, "When your heart beats too fast, what do you do?" A little girl answered, "Breathe deep like a dragon blowing smoke." A boy puffed his cheeks. "Take a big breath, then blow it all out." The whole group burst into giggles, and Sophia laughed with them. It was a laugh, unburdened, free of any mask. Across the street, Daniel's pickup rumbled to a stop. He stepped out, intending to walk past, but froze when his eyes landed on her. He stood half hidden behind a tree, watching the scene that tightened his chest. Sophia hair tousled in the wind eyes, lit with a joy that was pure and simple. She wasn't the heiress under trial, not the daughter of a tycoon. She was just Sophia, the girl who once folded paper crowns at 2 a.m, the girl who sat by Ben's bed all night through a fever. And Daniel saw it clear nothing she had done here had ever been false. From Sophia's canvas bag, something small peeked out Theo's battered teddy bear. When she had left in a hurry, the boys had secretly tucked it into her bag, a thread to hold her close. She hadn't noticed until that morning, her fingers brushing the worn fabric, the lopsided ears, the single button eye sewn on crooked. It was the treasure Theo had once placed in her hands with solemn pride. Now it lay in her lap, like a whisper, "You belong here." Sophia stroked the bear's head, tears rising. That evening, she returned to the wooden porch she knew so well. The teddy bear was pressed to her chest, her heart racing. The door opened, and there was Daniel. Surprise flickered in his eyes, then softened, as if he'd been waiting for this moment all along. Sophia held out the bear, her voice trembling. "Theo forgot this. I just wanted to give it back." Their fingers brushed as Daniel took it. Silence swelled between them, thick and fragile. Sophia turned to leave, but Daniel's voice stopped her. "I saw you today. At the park." Sophia froze. "You weren't doing that to explain yourself to me, were you?" His tone was low, steady. She shook her head, eyes clear. "No. I can't keep something that belongs to Theo. It's his. It's our thread." Daniel looked down at the bear in his hands, then back at her. His voice roughened. "You stayed when Ben was sick. You told them stories, made them laugh. Those things, they weren't in your father's test. Were they?" Sophia shook her head, tears sliding down her cheeks. "No. That was the part I chose. I chose to love them. No more words were needed. Only the gaze between them and the teddy bear lying between their hands, no longer just a toy, but a witness, a tether, pulling Sophia back into this family. Daniel saw her now for who she truly was, not a test taker, not an heiress in disguise, but a woman who had given her heart to him and his children. And inside him, a door slowly opened. The teddy bear, once a forgotten relic, had become the thread that held them together. And in that moment, Daniel understood Sophia's love had never been pretend. Chapter 9. Pancakes, a meadow, and a ring. Sunday morning dawned clear, the town sky a pure blue. A breeze carried the scent of fresh grass from the northern meadow. Inside the wooden house, warmth buzzed like it hadn't in years. Daniel bustling in the kitchen, bowls of strawberries, melted chocolate, and freshly mixed pancake batter spread across the counter. Theo and Ben, lost in oversized aprons, stood on stools cutting fruit with clumsy hands and bubbling chatter. "Daddy, how do you spell stay? I want to make the Y really big so Sophia can see it." Daniel smiled his rough hands, steadying the wooden spoon. Inside his chest, a heat swelled. Today would not be an ordinary day. After breakfast, Sophia came downstairs, her hair loose over a simple blouse. She froze when she saw them, Daniel and the boys, carrying a wobbly tray out onto the porch. Across a golden stack of pancake syrup letters trembled into words. "Will you stay forever?" Sophia covered her mouth, eyes brimming. The boys bounced in unison. "You have to answer, but it has to be happy. Tears, no sad ones." And the tears did fall bright and glistening in the sun. She nodded, voice breaking. "Yes. If I can, I want forever." Daniel's chest cracked open with relief, but he knew this was only the beginning. That afternoon, he packed a wide basket, rolled pancakes, strawberries, honey, a jug of lemonade. He loaded the boys into his truck, then looked at Sophia. "Come on, we've got something to show you." The dirt road opened into a meadow, wild grass, swaying the sky, stretching like blue silk. Sunset began to pour down in golden streams. Under an old oak, they spread a blanket. Theo and Ben darted off, picking wildflowers and handing clumsy bouquets to Sophia. She laughed, tucking one bloom into her hair. Sunlight tangled in her blonde strands like a halo. Daniel sat across, unable to look away. And fear tugged at him. If he didn't hold on, would this moment vanish like a dream? After their simple meal, the boys chased butterflies. Daniel drew a breath, hands trembling as he pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. The last light caught its surface, sparkling faint. He took Sophia's hand, his voice rough but steady. "Sophia, you brought laughter back to this house. You gave me hope I thought I'd lost forever. I can't promise perfection, but I can promise we'll build a real family together, you, me, and the boys." He opened the box. Inside lay a simple silver ring glowing in the sunset. "Will you stay? Not just today, but always." Sophia's hand flew to her lips, tears spilling freely. She didn't need to think. Her heart had known the answer all along. Yes. Yes, I'll stay. Forever. Daniel slid the ring onto her finger, his hand shaking, but sure. Just then the boys came running back, eyes wide. "She said yes, didn't she?" Theo shouted. Sophia laughed through her tears, pulling them close. "She said yes, little heroes." Laughter rang out, spilling across the meadow. The sun sank, painting the sky in red and orange. 4 figures sat together on a blanket, wildflowers in their hair, hands interlaced. No music, no fireworks, no glittering ballroom. Just a wide sky, a green meadow, and hearts choosing one another. Sophia rested her head on Daniel's shoulder, whispering, "I failed my father's test. But I found the only thing that matters, not an empire, but a family. Daniel squeezed her hand, murmuring, I think you just passed the only test worth taking. The last light slipped behind the trees. But in their chests, a new beginning burned bright. No luxury, no spectacle. Only pancakes, a meadow, a sunset, and 4 hearts choosing forever. Chapter 10. The Wedding. Under string lights. On a summer evening, the little wooden house transformed into something it had never been before. The backyard was lined with chairs borrowed from neighbors draped in simple white cloth. Overhead, strings of golden lights hung twinkling like stars brought down close to earth. Jars filled with wildflowers lined the aisle, their fragrance drifting softly through the air. There was no grand orchestra, only the song of evening birds and the laughter of friends and neighbors. On the grass, Theo and Ben dashed about in their roles as best men and candy distributors, their white shirts half untucked, their eyes gleaming with joy. Sophia stepped out from the back door, wearing a soft cream dress. Her bare feet touched the grass, her hair loose with a few wild flowers tucked gently in. No diamond crown, no pearl necklace, just a woman smiling, her eyes shining as 2 little boys ran to clasp her hands. Daniel waited beneath a wooden arch he had built himself, his hands trembling, but his gaze steady, brighter than ever. He wore a plain white shirt and trousers, yet he had never felt so sure, so grounded. As Sophia drew near, the boys shouted together, "The bride is here! The bride is here!" Laughter rippled across the yard. There was no minister, only an elderly neighbor acting as officiant with a warm, gravelly voice. He spoke a few simple words, then stepped aside for Daniel and Sophia. Daniel took her hands, voice breaking. "I don't have many promises to give, just one. I will always stand with you and the kids. There will be hard days, but I won't walk away, because now you are my home." Sophia's voice trembled, eyes brimming. "I don't bring wealth, but I bring my whole heart. I once feared I had to choose between the family I was born into and the family I longed for. But now I know I can have both, because I've found a true home." As they reached for the rings, a quiet sound came from the wooden gate. Every head turned. Richard Carter stood there. He wore a black suit, posture straight, but his eyes were not the cold, steely ones from the newspapers. Sophia froze. For a moment, she felt like a little girl again, trembling under his stern gaze. But this time, his eyes were different, quieter, blurred, as if holding back something deep. Richard walked slowly to the front row, saying nothing, demanding nothing. He simply nodded when his eyes met his daughter's. Sophia's breath hitched, tears spilling. In that single nod, she heard words he had never said: "I accept. I approve." Daniel's grip tightened around her hand. The boys shouted gleefully, "Kiss her now." Laughter broke out. Hands clapped. And under the golden lights, Daniel and Sophia kissed. Through misted eyes, Sophia saw her father turn away, brushing quickly at a tear. For the first time, she saw him not as a powerful mogul, but as a father. The small celebration continued in the backyard. Pancakes took the place of a wedding cake, strawberries and melted chocolate served as dessert. Neighbors raised cups in cheer. Children ran laughing through the garden. Daniel stood with his arm around Sophia, and the boys pressed close at their sides. Sophia looked around her father quietly, wiping tears at the edge of the crowd, the man she loved. 2 boys laughing loudly, and golden light draping over everything. She knew this was family. Not empire, not power, not a test. Just a small wooden house filled with laughter, tears, and love. Richard Carter didn't need speeches. That single nod had been enough to break Sophia's heart wide open. And in that moment, father and daughter were reconciled. The family was whole. Spring came again. The little wooden house, once heavy with silence, now brimmed with noise, laughter spilling everywhere, voices calling, and the tiny cries of two newborn angels. Sophia rocked gently in a chair, cradling twin baby girls. Daniel sat beside her, his rough hand tenderly resting on her shoulder. At the window, Theo and Ben pressed in, eyes wide with wonder. "Who do they look like, Dad?" Theo asked. "They look like me." "Check the eyebrows," Ben argued. The whole house erupted in laughter. Life as six began in sweet chaos. Midnight cries echoed through the house. Daniel carried one baby. Sophia soothed the other. Theo and Ben dashed around arguing over who got to hold the bottle or fetch the diapers. Sometimes, Daniel fell asleep in a chair, exhaustion dragging him under, and Sophia would quietly cover him with a blanket. Sometimes, Sophia broke into tears, overwhelmed, and Daniel would pull her close and whisper, "We'll make it." Because this is family, every struggle became another thread woven into the tapestry of love. Days turned into months, and the wooden house was never quiet again. Theo and Ben ran across the yard telling superhero tales to their sisters. The girls' babbling rose like music through every meal. One evening, all six gathered around the dinner table under the golden kitchen light. Daniel smiled, lifting a simple glass of water as if in toast. "Once I thought my greatest wealth was keeping the workshop alive. But now, I know. My greatest fortune is right here with all of you." Sophia nodded, voice trembling as she whispered, "The greatest fortune is family." In that kitchen, which had seen chaos and silence alike, warmth now lived. Crayon drawings lined the walls. Tiny shoes cluttered the porch. Every corner held a memory. Theo's old teddy bear, a crooked paper crown, the happy birthday banner folded carefully in a drawer. Not jewels, not mansions, but these small, ordinary things had built their family. The story doesn't end with fireworks, but with children's voices and steady love. Sophia had failed her father's test, but she had passed the test of the heart. Daniel, once shut away by loss, had dared to open himself again. And together, with two boys and two new daughters, they had built a home of 6 hearts, a treasure beyond measure. Wealth is not counted in possessions, but in love and the choice to stay. Do you believe love can heal even the deepest wounds? Comment your city, rate this story from 0 to 10, and subscribe for more CEO stories.